Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Welcome to the TMZ Podcast. Derek and Jason here.
Derek, Elon Musk has ordered every single Twitter employee back to the office, basically saying if you're not back here working from the office, no working from home, you're fired.
He's not mincing words. So ABC News obtained this audio of Elon talking to the remaining Twitter employees about what his terms are of coming back into the office.
People do not return to the office. When they are able to return to the office, they cannot remain at the company. End of story.
Why is your leadership trying to increase attrition rate if we are already understaffed and barely able to keep things running?
I'm not trying to increase attrition, but I think we are not understaffed. I think we are overstaffed. That is my opinion, which you're welcome to disagree with. Basically, if you can show up at an office and you do not show up at the office, resignation accepted. End of story.
What a cultural shift that is happening at Twitter. This used to be run like a Silicon Valley company, all warm and fuzzy during the pandemic, work from home. That's not how Elon does business.
We've been hearing nothing for the last 3 years except the fact that it's the greatest time to be an employee in the history of the world. We talk a lot about inflation. What we don't talk about very much is the fact that we've had the lowest unemployment in history. It's basically zero unemployment. There's always going to be some remnant unemployment. We're at 3.5%. And wages at an all-time high, likely in the history of the world. Yep. Wages at an all-time high. Yep. And there's all this employee power. He is unilaterally seizing that employer power back for Twitter.
Yeah, and look, Elon's philosophy, and he's been open about this. This happened at Tesla as well. There is this clash that happened after the pandemic. People were working from home. Some things worked, but his philosophy is you get some different energy when you have people in the office and you can interact in person. That's his philosophy. And we talked about this in the morning meeting. He owns Twitter, everyone. Yes. He owns it. He's not beholden to shareholders. Right. He's not trying to please anyone. He owns the thing outright. He's got a few minority investors, right, but he gets to do whatever he wants. And if he wants people in the office and that's a condition of working here, he can do it.
Now, the risk he runs, of course, and this is what the person who asked him the question is pointing out, is you might lose your better employees because there's so much opportunity now for employees. It's starting to change. The economy's slowing a little bit, but there's so many opportunities for employees to go other places and earn more money and call their shots and work from home that they might lose some really good employees that they really need to keep for the business. He's already under pressure because he fired so many of the top line employees.
And he's obviously willing to accept that. A lot of people think this rollout of his ownership has been disastrous. And in some respects, the way Twitter looks right now is wild. It's no longer a place where you can get reliable information at all. There's a lot of parody accounts where you've got fake presidents saying funny things. It is very funny. I think Twitter has never been funnier, but it's definitely a different place. And so they're saying that's going to get worse because content moderation is a part of this game, man. Right. And he has sort of abandoned it in the early going. Here's what's interesting, though. So at Tesla, there are a few employees who do get to work from home, and he was asked about this and called them exceptional people.
But you made a point in the morning meeting that I liked. He initially stumbled and said they are exceptions, and caught himself and said they're exceptional. So it's not like he was saying these are exceptions. He's saying the really good folks get to stay at home. You got to prove yourself, and until you do, come in the office.
Yeah, he could have said they're exceptions to the rule and let people think, oh, maybe they have child care issues or something. Right. He didn't do that. No. He said, no, they're actually just so good they have more leverage than you. And if I'm calling you back here, it's because you don't have that leverage. Come back to work.
So Elon Musk, personal opinion, I guess, for what it's worth, total prick, right? Real jerk, not a nice person,
massive
all
ego.
That stuff, massive ego. Obviously an incredible futurist inventor, the whole thing. But I respect the fact that he's like, this is the way it is. It's my company. I bought it outright. It's not a publicly traded. I answer to nobody except myself.
Yes.
And this is my rule. And if you don't like it, go find another job. And there's some element of like, well, you don't have to like it, but you got to respect the game, right?
Yeah, look, you and I are pretty old school about this. He's the boss. He gets to say he likes the people who work in person, and that's it. I do think the world has sort of shifted, and he may lose some very, very talented people over this, and then it's sort of biting your nose off to spite your face, or cutting your nose off to spite your face. I suppose it's hard to bite it.
Incredibly hard to bite your nose.
But so I don't know how it'll work out for him, but nevertheless, he has the right to do this, and he's just, I do respect this about Elon. He doesn't mince words. He tells you how he feels. He wants people in the office, and only if you're exceptional can you stay at home. So we'll see how it works out.
Speaking of people who are losing battles, though, Drake and 21 Savage, they put out they as part of their campaign to launch their new music. They say they parodied the Vogue cover, put themselves on a cover of Vogue.
Pictures of him with Anna Wintour, so
right,
forth.
right, all sorts of things. Did it both on social and actually printed off posters and posted them in New York
Huge
City.
stunt, huge promotional stunt.
A few days ago, we did the story that Vogue had sued them to stop them, wanted money, number one, for a judge to order them to stop. Number two, they wanted damages, saying basically you're profiting off of the Vogue label. You've repeatedly asked us if you could do this. We've told you no. You went ahead and did it anyways. We want a pound of flesh. Absolutely. And they've won the first battle. Vogue has won the first battle.
They did. They got a temporary restraining order. This is not surprising to me. So basically now Drake and 21 Savage, the album is already released, but all the promotional media that's out there has to be pulled. They cannot put any more of the fake Vogue covers out there, at least until there's a hearing on November 22nd to see if they get a longer injunction. But for right now, they got to pull all this stuff. It's not that surprising to me because Vogue was able to go in there and basically say, this is confusing.
Right.
This is not clear parody. If Mama June did a Vogue cover, it's so absurd that people would read it as parody, but you're confusing our customers. And people might say,
they
look,
actually printed magazines, by the way.
They printed real magazines, and
yeah.
they might say, look, it's cool to be associated with Drake, so I don't know about the damages question down the road, how Vogue can say this hurt them, but as an initial matter, it is confusing. I would believe that Drake was on the cover of Vogue and have no problem believing that.
In the way they did it was so professional, with digital artists and everything. They made it look like there was unquestionably confusion.
Yes.
People thought, until Vogue sued them, people thought these were legitimate Vogue magazines. So not to get too wonky, but the way you measure damages is one of two ways, right? Was Vogue hurt by this? Did their business suffer? The answer is probably not, right? As a matter of fact,
Drake will have experts to say, absolutely not. You sold more magazines and so forth.
So the only damages to which they're going to be entitled are any profits they can ascribe to Drake and 21 Savage based on the use of the Vogue name. Easier to do, but still hard. They're going to look. Courts deal with this all the time. You get experts up there to say that a certain percentage of the sales of his music are related to the stunt,
to Vogue's goodwill. Blah, blah,
they'll
blah.
get a couple witnesses in there say, "Hey, I thought it was great and I loved it, and therefore I thought they were associated." Whatever. So
let me ask you a question.
That's why they're suing for $4 million and not $40 million, though.
Fair
right?
enough. Is this going there? Do you see a protracted lawsuit between Condé Nast and Drake? I just don't see it.
I don't even see the November 22nd hearing happening.
Me neither.
Because I think Drake at this point is like, nah, we wanted out of this. And by the way, here, Anna, here's your $4 million. We'll give another $4 million in charity of your choice.
Totally agree.
And
this actually to me seems to work out for everyone. Condé Nast gets to go in there and say we weren't behind this, so they've now notified the world. It's a huge story.
They own Vogue.
They own Vogue, and they weren't behind the stunt. The world now knows it was a stunt. Drake got the juice and of the promotional campaign. Everyone kind of won. Here's a small check. Here's some to charity, like you say, and it goes away.
Right.
Let's move on to a serious story. What's going on with Kyrie Irving and Adam Silver? So this saga has now taken a turn, and I think we may see this maybe a little bit differently, but let's lay it out first.
I'm stunned where we got to so quickly, though.
Yes, I am stunned as well. So remember, Kyrie Irving posted a link to a movie on Amazon that is clearly an anti-Semitic movie.
Questions the Holocaust.
Questions the Holocaust, calls it a falsehood, and so forth. That is not in question anymore. He then did some combative press conferences where he basically didn't clarify to a sufficient extent that this was anti-Semitic. People were asking him, are you anti-Semitic? He gave these sort of answers that sort of weaved in and out and weren't very direct. So Adam Silver got very upset and said, there's going to be severe sanctions. And they levied a severe punishment of at least 5 games and a host of other things that Kyrie has to do, including meeting with the commissioner. Adam Silver now says he met with Kyrie. And he does know Kyrie Irving. He knows he's an eccentric guy. He's been in the league for a long time. But he says he has no doubt that Kyrie Irving is not anti-Semitic. So he has zero doubt after this conversation that this kid's heart, maybe he's confused, maybe he's curious. He didn't go into much detail about that, but he says this kid is not anti-Semitic.
Yeah, I think he didn't say he wasn't misguided, and I think that's where Adam Silver's drawing that line, that he doesn't harbor ill will towards the Jewish people. I find that difficult to reconcile with the propagation of this anti-Semitic movie and the real horrors. And Kyrie's been asked a number of times whether or not he believes the Holocaust took place, and he's never come right out and said, yes, I believe it took place.
Yes. He's given these circuitous answers. The quote was, he says the Holocaust was an event that has a meaning to a lot of Jewish people who suffered, and it could have been avoided. That was the substance.
Right.
So people say he did acknowledge because he says people suffered.
And he said in an event.
But the word after event wasn't happened. It was meaning.
Right.
And I think that's a problem.
But not only that, it's such an easy question to answer.
Yeah.
Of course, the Holocaust happened. It's one of the great tragedies of the last few centuries, and it's something we should learn from. That's easy.
Yeah.
Right? Instead, he said it's an event that we can learn from. It's just like, you're obviously, Kyrie, you are telling us that there's more to it than a simple yes, it happened. You are telling us that you're qualifying it in some way. And it's hard to decipher exactly how he's qualifying it, but he is certainly, and I don't even think Kyrie would disagree with this, he is qualifying the position that this happened.
You made the example, and I thought it was a great one in the morning meeting. You said, what if someone had said the Middle Passage is something that has meaning to a lot of African Americans and their suffering? It would sound bad. The Middle Passage existed,
right,
and slaves were transported to the New World along that passage. That's just the answer. It's a historical fact.
Right, and if you were to ask me, do you think the Middle Passage was a real thing? And I said, well, it was an event
you said, well, it's
that affected a lot of people. I would
expect you to just say yes.
Of course it happened. One of the worst things in the history of humanity, right? But no, that's
why I posit that this is a miss by Adam Silver. And here,
yes,
let me lay this out.
With you. Go.
I tend to think that Kyrie Irving is not a virulent KKK David Duke style anti-Semite. I never thought he was.
Yeah.
I think he's actually one of the more dangerous variety of people who find these ideas seductive. There's a certain sort of, I want to believe that there are some things that Jews do to control the media and control business, sort of what Kanye West was saying, but it has the patina of something that you can believe is occurring rather than they have horns. I've always said, if Kyrie Irving, the anti-Semites who say, Jews have horns are absurd, and he's not that. I'm not saying. I think he's actually a more dangerous version because he watched a documentary.
He makes people think, well,
he's like, hey, think about
it didn't happen. Right.
Yeah, and Adam Silver, not to point that out and say that's actually also horrific and he needs to recant and retract all the statements, is a miss by Adam Silver.
I want an unqualified thing. This gets to something you and I have talked about before, and people have accused you and me of thinking that we're way smarter than we think that we are. So, and
yes,
likely true, right? I want to throw that at Kyrie Irving, too. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's nearly as thoughtful, as knowledgeable, as educated on these issues as he thinks he is.
Yes.
And instead of really going into a deep dive by himself, he has allowed his thoughts to be corrupted by movies, and mostly by other people who are putting ideas into his head. And I don't think Kyrie Irving is nearly as smart as he thinks he is.
Yes.
And therefore doesn't go the extra mile to actually figure out what's what. But there are nuances in everything.
Of course there are.
Nuances in everything.
There's nuances to the history, of course.
And I don't even have a problem with somebody. You don't have to adopt as orthodoxy anything that you hear ever. But this idea that he cannot bring himself to acknowledge at a facial level that the Holocaust happened, that millions of people died, and it's probably the most horrific incident of the 20th century.
There's footage. It's not that old of an event, so it's very hard.
You can go that far, and then you can say, but I think that Hollywood talks about it too much. We ignore the sufferings of other people because Jews have a lot of power. That would be too alarmist.
No, but that's
that the
different.
Jewish people are very big in movies, and therefore we talk about the story to the exclusion of other stories that should be told. I can handle all that, fine.
Yeah.
I don't know the facts well enough to remark on them, but fine. But
that's
for him,
this.
that's not this.
That's not this. And so, we'll see where it plays out. There are still a series of benchmarks that he has to meet. Some of them I know are sensitivity training, a donation to the ADL of $500,000, and some anti-Semitic training. So if he with an open heart goes through those things and sort of learns from this in a more direct fashion what is fact and what is sort of vile hate speech, I could get on board with, opening my arms to Kyrie Irving. He does seem sort of curious, but he is misguided.
Yes.
And it's very, very troubling.
He's a smart
at this
guy.
point.
Anyway, it's talking about other athletes in decline. Tom Brady, Gisele Bundchen, they are divorced. But they live across we were calling it a stream yesterday. It's more like a river, but they live across
when I heard it was a creek and then I saw it, I was like,
we called it a creek.
Yeah, that's not a creek.
By definition, a creek can only be like 4 feet wide, I think, like this. And this is a 70-foot estuary or something like that.
Yeah, I live in Florida. There are creeks in your backyard that you can throw a rock over without much trouble. This is a broader body of water. But anyway.
So Gisele bought the house directly across this body of water, this creek, as we were calling it yesterday, from Tom Brady. Makes all the sense in the world, but people are thinking maybe it's a bit of a, we had this same situation with Kanye a couple of years ago where he, in the midst of his divorce from Kim, he bought a house across the street from her.
And we called it creepy surveillance.
Now,
we said that was weird.
But apparently he did that without Kim knowing. This seems to be Gisele and Tom agreeing that what's in the best interest of the kids is they can be across this thing and they can take the little boats across.
Yeah, look, they've been beating the drum. I mean, Tom has said this is cordial, although they released a separate statement. And we're like, it doesn't seem that cordial. This is an indication that it actually may be somewhat cordial, that they want to, for the good of the kids, be neighbors, and it's sort of easy for them to sort of go between the houses. It's different than the Kanye situation because you're right, that read as creepy, like he was glomming onto her and she didn't want him anywhere nearby. To the extent they've agreed to this sort of neighbor situation, I don't know what we're supposed to draw other than that it's at least functional and cordial enough to be close to one another.
Yeah, I'd go towards the functional and away from the cordial.
Okay,
because
fair enough.
What I'm reading here, and we're reading tea leaves, of course, is that there's some really bad blood between them, especially on Gisele's part towards Tom. But they are, if my wife and I were to have a horrific divorce, we would nevertheless live near each other because it's in the best interest of the kids, and that would always come first no matter what. Yes. And I think that's what's happening here.
Yeah, it seems mature, is the way I'd put it. Is they've got older kids who could, sort of suffer from the separation, and they're sort of dampening that or mitigating it in some respect.
So is this the end? This is the end of the Gisele Tom story, right? They're divorced legally. They live across the. I mean, his career and his career is in such an incredible state of decline at this point. It's sad to see.
Although, the minute the divorce was finalized, he had a game and had a vintage. It wasn't a good game until the point, but he had a vintage drive down the field that looked like the old Tom Brady. And some people are saying, wow, he's now unburdened. He can become Tom again. So maybe a glimmer of hope that he turns it around.
So Derek's talking about that he was terrible, one of the worst offensive performances ever until 2 minutes left in the game, and then he had a vintage come from behind
drove down the field.
I wonder if he got a call from his lawyer or text like, hey, she just signed. And then it comes out and
he just hears
marches down the field.
I'm ready, Roger
and
that.
Next week he comes out with 6 touchdowns. It's gonna be a lot of talk.
It's incredible. All right, let's turn to a sad note.
We're gonna end on this, right?
Gallagher.
It's sad, but we got to treat it as a remembrance and a tribute.
This is a tribute. So Gallagher, the comedian who was so big. I mean, guys Jason and I's age, this guy was such a phenomenon. He would go on stage. He was a comedian. He would tell a few jokes. People in the front few rows would bring plastic sheets and cover themselves because he would put large melons, usually watermelons, take an oversized comical sledgehammer and bash the watermelon so that it would spray all over the audience. And people lapped it up. It sounds hokey, but it was huge. I don't know how to convey to people that Gallagher was a phenomenon.
So he was a phenomenon, and he wasn't the biggest comedian in the world in the 70s and 80s, and prior was there.
But he occupied a big
But he had
niche.
he would rent out these enormous stadiums to do these comedy concerts, and it wasn't until Eddie Murphy came along and made it into Eddie Murphy that those things had ever seen. It was him and Howie Mandel that were huge, and then
fill
Eddie Murphy,
arenas.
right? And then Eddie Murphy comes along and he blows them both out of the water. But at
Andrew
the time,
Dice Clay and all these guys came later.
Nobody was doing what Gallagher was doing, filling up these enormous arenas, and then he'd tell jokes, off-color jokes,
somewhat off-color, and he became problematic as the world sort of got a little bit more progressive and politically correct. He didn't sort of fit in the same way.
But his shtick was that he would bust these watermelons, and it was as famous a trademark as any celebrity had at the time.
So famous, by the way, he passed away at 76. He was in hospice and sort of not in good health at the end. But he was so famous at the time that he has this brother. His name is Leo Gallagher. His brother's name was Ron Gallagher. And Ron Gallagher, there was such an appetite for watermelon smashing, went out on tour as Gallagher 2, TWO. And Gallagher, this guy who just passed away, the Gallagher, sued him and said,
sued his own brother.
Yeah, he came out, they had the same hair, he had this sort of like trademark look with the suspenders and the whole thing.
And also filled up arenas.
Filled up arenas as well because people just wanted more watermelon bashing. He sued his own brother and had him sort of taken off tour and all this sort of stuff. But it was a wild, wild time. And it's important. This is a big story for us. I saw it at the top of the board. It's like when someone like Gallagher passes away, everyone remembers, oh man, I remember the watermelon smashing guy. He's the epitome of that kind of story. So dead at 76, not that old.
No, not that old. But to your point about death, like when young people die, right? We just had Takeoff
died.
Tragic.
It's
tragic. There's no lighthearted talking about it. Gallagher was 76 and been sick for a long time. It's not, obviously, it's very sad for his family.
But it's different.
But to remember back on the joy that he brought, like to me, watching him on television when I was a little kid, watching him smash watermelons, it was something. I really enjoyed it.
I suspect you will see a lot of people do tributes today on video, go buy a watermelon and smash it in their backyard. That's just the era we live in, so I think there's going to be a run on watermelons. That's my prediction. All right, that'll do it for us today.
All right, guys. See you Monday. Bye.
Take care.